Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Basra Samach Tes 69. We're going to start on the top of 69a. Our daf is dedicated for Shmir for the Chayalim. That's all for the Shvuyim. Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this Eis Tzara, and Hashem should bring about a full justice for this terrible killing that happened this past Shabbos. So it says on Bava Basra Samach Tes Amud Aleph that it had said in the Mishnah that if you sell the field, somebody who's a mocher as hasadha, one who sells the field, has sold alongside of it any stones that are in the field that are for the purpose of the field. Like if you have whatever stones you have in the purpose of the field. Maya vanam shein tzarcha. What are stones that are in the field for the purpose of the field? Hachi targimo. So here they explained it. Avnei da'akpa. These are stones that they used to put as like a paperweight, like a stone weight that they would weigh down the stuff in the field. So if you had stones that were being used as weights, that's sold along with the field. Ula said these are stones that were used as a fence, that were arranged to make a fence. They had a stone fence. So Gemara asked the question. When he used to teach us, he said the stones that were tziburos together, gathered together for a fence, not arranged. The Gemara says, well, change what Rebbe Chia taught. Change it from tziburos to siduros. Tani siduros. Hachi tergimu. Here they translated it avnei da'akpa. Here they explained it as stones that were used as a paperweight. So the Rebbe Meir, the mitakna and afagavdo and mechatnan. The Meir is in the position, even if you haven't actually used it, he's going to say in the next chapter in Amochares Asvina. He's going to say in Amochares Asvina, Rameir is going to be in the position that if you sold a vineyard, you sold the tashmishe karam, you sold the things that you're used to help the vineyard. And we and the rabbis argue and say that the things that are not fixed, according to Rebbe Meir, they are sold. And so therefore, according to Rebbe Meir, that as long as you prepared it to be used as a paperweight, you smooth it down, even though you didn't actually use it. Or the rabbis say no, it actually has to be used. The rabbis say it actually has to be used for a paperweight or a stone weight. Excuse me. And according to Ula, the stones that were arranged for Ula's position is it has to be stones that were set up for a fence. Or according to Meir, it's where you arrange it even though you didn't spread it out. And according to the Rabbanan, you had to have actually set it up as a fence. Now we have the next part. It says in the Mishnah, you sold the vine, the poles of the vineyard. You know what this refers to? The reeds in the vineyard that are for its need. You ever see a vineyard, Izzy? So what are we talking about? The reeds in the vineyard? No. So when you have a vineyard, you see poles there that are holding the grapevines up. So the question is, if you sell the vineyard, have you sold those poles alongside with it? So our Mishnah says that you have. So the Gemara says, "Kanem maya v'disayu." What are we talking about? What are these reeds for? So Amid Bei Rabbi Yanai, Kanem mechulakim shemamidim tachas hagafanim. These are the smoothed out reeds that you place under the grapevines. Where Meridim is shaf, and according to Meir, they're the ones that you sanded down. Afagav the will mukman, even though they had not yet been set up. And Rabbanan hu the mukman, the rabbis who set it up. Why do we say at a chasam and kala we say you have your invei agefen, you bless the bride and the groom? It's a statement of the Gemara. You bless the bride and the groom like grapevines. Why do we bless the bride and the groom to be like grapevines? Because grapevines, they're the only fruits that are supported by these reeds. And saying you should be supported by everybody around you. Keep that Dvar Torah in your pocket. Next time they call upon you to give a Dvar Torah, the Sheva Brachos, Meir B'Yameinu Amein, Be'ezras Hashem Yisparach. Soon by all of us, we have more simchos, so then you could say this Dvar Torah. You sell the crops that are attached to the ground. Even though the crops are about to be cut down, if they're attached to the ground, then we are sold with the field. And if you have a bundle of reeds, if it's too small, it's smaller than a base rova, then since it's so insignificant, it's bottled to the ground and it's sold with the ground. Even though these reeds are very strong. It's a shomera, and you sell the guard's house. Sheinos tzuya batit. You sell the guard's house if it's not cemented down, because then we're going to say it's bottled to the karaka. It's nullified by the ground. Even though it was not fixed down, we assume that it's not an independent item and it's sold at the field. There's a charov she'enu murkav, and the carob tree that's not grafted on yet. That's besuas hashikma, and the young sycamores, those are sold with the field. Afagav dalime, even though they're strong. Avalom macharas avanim she'enu etzarcha. You have not sold the stones that were not needed for the field. Those are not sold with the field. According to Rameir, the stones that are not yet prepared, or that they were not yet used as a paperweight. Fine, same idea. You haven't sold the poles in the grapevines that are not for the purpose of the grapevine. You haven't sanded them down. You haven't put them up to hold up the grapes. And you haven't sold the crops that are removed from the ground. Even though it's needed even though it needs the land. So if you have crops that are not connected to the ground, but they need the land, they're not sold with the field. Why would a crop that's not connected to the ground need the land? What's the thinking? So they used to cut the crops and then they would dry them out on the land. Not a bundle of reeds that's a big, significant size. It's the size of a rova. Even though the reeds are small, since this is a significant portion, it's not sold with the field. Not only is this bundle of reeds sold, even if you have a small bundle of spices, and it has its own name, it's not sold with the field because it's its own independent item, so we don't assume it's sold with the field. And that's where it's called. If it was called like the roses of this person, it's its own rose field, a patch of roses, then and it's got its own name to it, it's not sold with the field. And not if there's a guard's house who's cemented into the ground, because then we're going to assume it's its own independent item. Even though it's attached to the ground. By Rabbi Elazar, let's say you have the Melavno Shapsachim. So Melavno Shapsachim, this is the molding around the door. You know what molding is around the door, Izzy? You know what that is? It's like a little it's a decorative strip that they put around like the like if most houses in the corners, like it goes right under where the walls meet each other. You put like a little decorative strip there. So that's called the molding. So the molding of the doors is not sold with the house. And Lamna Shapsachim is sold. Excuse me, he's asking the question. Lamna Shapsachim Mao. So is that sold? If it's attached with cement, obviously it's sold because it's attached. Where is it a question to and then a kiti b'sichi, where it's just attached with like nails. So what would be the one they're taking? So what about by Rabbi Zera? What about the following? The molding around the windows. Do we say it's just decorative? And therefore it is not sold. Since it's attached, it's sold. Teku. So what about mezuzahs? When you sell a house, do you sell a mezuzah? Is the mezuzah sold at the house? That's an interesting point. Depends how nice it is. The assumption is, first of all, the mezuzah cases are for sure not sold. But the question is, what about the mezuzah itself? So the mezuzah, if it's a Jew you sold it to, you have to leave it up. And you're allowed to ask him for money, but he doesn't have to pay you. If it's a non-Jew, you're not allowed to leave it up because the assumption is he's not going to guard it properly. So by Rabbi Yirmiyah, Malamno shall carry amita. Let's say you have the molding of the floor of a bed. What would be the halacha there? If it's going to be moved with the bed, that's not even a question. Because it's moved with the bed. So obviously, so therefore it's not sold with it. Where it's not moved with the bed. So therefore it doesn't move. Yes. What'd you say?
What are we going to do?
So that's a very good question. So the basic point is all of these questions he's asking, is any of this practical? So in the one sense, it's not at all practical. In the other sense, it's extremely practical. In one sense, it's not practical because all of this was based upon the contextual understanding at that time. When you sold something to somebody, what do you assume you sell it with it? But it's the basic idea is very relevant to our lives today. That if we have something which we sell, let's say you sell me your car, the assumption is that, and then we say, okay, where's the spare tire, for example? So the assumption is if it's something that's typically sold along with the car, then that will be sold with it. But if it's not typically sold along with the car, that's not it. So basically, if you have a spare tire in your car, do we assume that that was sold? Or let's say used to be like the radios used to come out of the car. So did you sell the radio with the car, or you sell a house? Did you sell the refrigerator with the house, etc., like that? So all this is extremely relevant, even though the context changed for nowadays. And not the carob tree, the significant carob tree, the significant sycamore, they're items on their own, so they're not sold alongside. They're not sold alongside it. So because they're significant, they're not sold with the field. On top of samachtes, base. So the Gemara says, "Menani mili." How do we know that these trees on their own that they're not sold with it? So Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, the Amar Kra, it says in the pasuk, "Vayakom stay Ephron asher b'machpelah," that the field of Ephron that was by the cave was sold to Abraham. And it says in that thing, and all the trees that share bekol gvulo saviv, all the trees that are all around it are sold with it. Mishat tzarchut gvul saviv, a tree whose identity comes from being around the other trees. This comes to exclude yatsu elu she'ein tzrichun gvul saviv. These trees that have an identity, even though they're not included with the other fields around it. And that means to say, like these mature trees that are significant on their own, they're not sold with the field. Amar Misharshia, so Misharshia says, we learn from the pasuk Saviv, Mikan Lamitzar Min Torah. This teaches us that boundaries are from the Torah. Rashbam says this means that the boundary markers they used to have, like these piles of earth or these stones, that those are also sold, and that's biblical speaking. And we said earlier that it means also the whole concept of a definition of a boundary of separation between two items, of drawing distinctions in life. All this is something that comes from the Torah. Amar Yehuda, Haiman de Mazbin Aro Chavre, somebody who sells land to his friend, Tzarach Michtavle, Kanelucha Diklin Utaoen Vahotzim Vitzitzin. He says somebody who sells land to his friend needs to write to him in the contract, acquire for yourself in the field. You've acquired also the palm trees and the young trees and the small palm trees, the hutzin and the tzitzin. And afagav the kosav like kani. Even though you don't have to write it, it makes the contract better. You're supposed to write things in the contract, even though it's not necessary sometimes in order to make it a beautiful contract, to make it a better deal. So this is also something that's relevant to you, Izzy. You asked, how is this relevant? When you sell something, you're supposed to spell it out on the contract to make a shufra d'shtara, to make it a more beautiful contract, to make it a more beautiful deal, to paper it over. To the more paper you have on it, the better. That's what the Gemara says. Amar way. So let's say the seller says to the purchaser, "Ara v'dikwe, this land and the palm trees." Now he doesn't need to include it, but let's say he says it anyway. I'm selling you the land and the palm trees. These are things that are not necessary to say. So since it's not necessary saying, yet he still includes it. We see from here he's adding something. What's he's adding? Let's see if there are palm trees. If there are palm trees, then he should give him 2. Because he says he's selling the palm trees. But let's say there are no palm trees aside from this field. He's for sure intending to sell him 2 other palm trees. And if there are palm trees that are meshubah, they're encumbered to his creditor, then then he should he has to redeem 2 palm trees from his creditor and give it to him. Yes. Encumbered is like, let's say you okay, let me give an example. Let's say you have a property, and then on this property you have the city gives you a charging station, so everybody could come and give you that charging station, right? So you have a car and you charge your car in that charging station, and the city gives you a grant of $100,000 to put in a charging station there. So now everybody in the neighborhood could come and charge their car there. Does that make your property worth more or less? No, but it makes it worth less. Why? Because now your property is encumbered. Because now you can't just sell the house to whatever anybody you want because they have to keep it's encumbered. It has something on it. It has no, not more people encumbered. The person who buys your house can't do whatever they want with it. There's a charging station there. He can't get rid of that. The city has a contract on it. There's a lien on it. It has possession over it. It's got a part of your property is attached to the city. So therefore, it's called a lien. So let's say somebody has a lien on some of your palm trees. Then you have to redeem them if you use that language. You understand? So let's say, just start this again. Let's say the seller says to the purchaser, I'm selling to you Ara Vidikla. He says, I'm selling to you the real estate and the palm trees. So basically that we understand this to mean that he's selling two different things. One is the sale of the field with all the palm trees, and then he's adding on to that the palm trees in another place. And so the chazina, we have to look at it. Yislei Dikle, if he has palm trees outside of this field, Yavle Trey Dikle, he has to give him two. But if he doesn't have additional palm trees outside of this field, Zabin Law Trey Dikle, then he's basically saying, I'm going to sell you palm trees that I'm going to buy for you. So then he has to buy for him two palm trees. But let's say he has palm trees, but there's a lien on them. Somebody else owns them. He can't really sell them yet. Parakle trade dikli. He has to redeem two of them and give them to him. Let's say he says Arabidically. Let's say he says, I'm giving you a land with the palm trees that are in it. Chazina dikli. We have to look if there are palm trees there. If there are, Zabina, it's a valid sale. Below, if there are no palm trees in that field, so it's a mistake. Yeah, Jeff is telling us the encumbrance is a security for a debt. No, I don't really necessarily agree with you, Jeff. Charging station would represent. No, the property, we're saying that the property is, Jeff says, the encumbrance is a security for a debt. But what we're talking about is that the property is encumbered, meaning to say the property is basically the property has something attached to it that the person buys it can't just basically it is there. The person who has the property has taken a portion of the property, and the city is now basically in possession of that portion. Jeff, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, in the case of the charging station example, he couldn't just
hold on 1 second. What? Say it again.
In the case of the charging station example, he couldn't pay off that. He couldn't just pay off the city and release the encumbrance. The Gemara here is talking about his ability to pay off the security of the debtor of the security holder, so that he can then give the trees. That's why I was just thinking.
You don't think he could pay off the city and get rid of the charging station?
The city has an easement over your sidewalk in front of your house. You think if you wanted to, you could just tell the city, I'm buying my sidewalk back? They tell you get lost.
No, but the charging station's a different thing.
Maybe.
The city has a fundamental right to put up a sidewalk in front of any house in the district. That's their right. They don't have a right to come in and put a charging station in everybody's lot.
Well, if they passed a law that said they could, then maybe they would. Anyway, we're going over.
In this case, they haven't. If they did that, maybe, but they haven't done that. They just I happen to have seen this past week. Somebody gave the city put in a charging station into a lot. So I said to the guy, does this make your property worth more? And he said, no, it makes it worth less because it's encumbered now. But he took the cash for the charging station. You understand what I'm saying? Whatever. I'm sure I'm getting the exact definition wrong. And
yeah, I got it. I got it.
I
get the point.
Okay, anyway, the point is, we're trying, the point is, you get the point, that there's something that your property is not completely yours. Somebody else has a claim on it. And the more people have claims on your property, which you do, you give other people claims on your property to get cash, but that makes it worth less because you have less, there are other people already own a portion of it. However, like whatever different definitions there are. So let's say, or whatever different contexts there are. Arabe Dikle, let's say the seller says to the purchaser, I'm selling you a field that is appropriate to put in palm trees. That means he doesn't have to give him any. He says, I'm giving you a field that you could have palm trees. But what rather we say is, And even if there are no palm trees in the field is good because he says the chazi with dikla kamaroi. Always saying is a field that's capable of having palm trees. Amarway with bar mi dikla pulanya. Let's say he says, I'm selling you this field except for this palm tree. Chazinon e dikla tavahu. So let's say the seller says to the purchaser, I'm selling you this field except for this palm tree. Then we look to see if that palm tree is a good palm tree, then shiri shiari. Then he left it out. Idikla bishu, if it's a bad palm tree, then kol shekain hanach. Then for sure he left back all the other palm trees that were good for him. Because his intent was to say that even this palm tree, which is bad, I'm leaving for myself, and for sure all the better ones. Okay. But if that palm tree was good, then he didn't, then the other palm trees he had sold to the person.
Counterintuitive, because in every other instance, you're looking at the specific language. And here the specific language is except for this palm. It's not except for this palm and all the other palms that are even better than this one. I mean, I don't know if it was that's what it says.
You're right. And so it is right. So Bill's question is very good. So Rabbeinu Haigon, this is the way we said it was the way the majority of the people say it. Rabbeinu Haigon says that if you say except from this palm, it's referring to the best palm tree. It's probably bothered by what Bill is bothered by. Shigoyach. Amrway, so the seller says to the purchaser, I'm selling to you this field, levar meilane, except for the trees. If there is in the field fruit trees like olives and figs and apples, then levar meilane, then it's aside from these trees. If there's palm trees, aside from the palm trees. Because when he says he intended to keep it for himself, it is like gufni. There's grapevines of barmi gufni. Then aside from the grapevines, ilani v'gufni. Let's say there's both trees and grapevines. Then he intended barmi ilani aside from the trees. Ilani v'dikwe. Let's say there are trees and palm trees, barmi ilani aside from the trees. Gufni v'diklani. If there are grapevines and palm trees, barmi gufni. Fine. Amarav. So now Rav says, let's say somebody sells to his field except for the trees that are in it. And so basically he left behind the trees for himself. Kol sha'olin lo b'chefel. So then we're going to say, have a great day, Izzy. We'll see you later. Take care. So then we're going to say, under those circumstances, he's selling everything, every tree that you need to climb up with a rope in order to get its fruit. That's called a tree. Basically says, I'm selling you this field except for the trees that in it, meaning to say he left back all those trees that you need to climb up to get the fruit. But let's say, so, but anything that you don't need to climb up a rope, is not going to be considered like left over. But Dayane Goa Amri, but the judges of Goa, we already said in elsewhere that this refers to Shmuel and Karna. They said Kolsha, all Kovsho, Laveshir. Any tree that is soft, so much so that the yoke that was placed around the neck of an oxen, any tree that's so soft so that the yoke that is placed around the neck of the oxen is going to stop him, and the tree is not going to stop the plow. Is going to knock it over, and the tree is not going to stop the plow from working. That's not considered a tree. Lo v'shir. Kol she'ena ol kovsho. Anything that the yoke does not stop him, that's going to be considered a strong tree of Havishir. And they're not arguing. One is referring to a palm tree, whereas the Dayane Go are referring to just regular trees. All right, we'll stop here. Pick this up, God willing. Oh, wait, I want to say something about the schedule. So